Hey, and welcome to the Signal Watch. Today we're talking about the movie The Flash. And if you've seen The Flash, which is probably why you're here, you know that the Flash can travel through time to try and solve problems. Well, we had our own problem. I thought my hard drive crashed and I'd lost the first recording of a podcast. So we traveled through time to try and fix that by recording it again. And as I was working on that podcast, I realized I had the files of the original podcast. So we're going to open a multiverse of podcasts so you can see both an Earth 1 and an Earth 2 version of the same podcast, or I guess listen to it, and you can see that it is pointless to do things over and over again and hope for a different outcome. So anyway, we're just doing this because we have it, and I hope you enjoy these two different takes on the same thing. Thank you to Stuart for sitting through doing both of them, and maybe you can hear how our opinions change over the course of a week. Anyway, thanks so much, and here we go with the podcast. Hi, you've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens. And with me today is...
Stuart Ward. Hello.
Are you sure about that?
I wasn't, no, I was gonna be cute. I was gonna say some time traveling thing, but I decided against it.
Well, we are, in fact, traveling back to the future. Which is very on theme. We've traveled to the past to correct a mistake that we made because we had finished recording I think we talked for like 90 minutes about this dumb movie. And then my computer's hard drive decided it was going to eat itself before we'd even finished. Like Stuart and I were kind of saying goodbye to each other, kind of having the post-recording chit chat. And my computer just absolutely cratered. So since last week, I've had to buy a new computer, and I was unable to recover anything off the old computer. Luckily, most of my stuff's in the cloud. There's your reason to pay for backup elsewhere. Anyway, so we're here to talk about The Flash again, and hopefully this will only happen one time.
We're gonna get it right this time.
We're gonna get it right. So we're like, this is going to be extremely hard because we're not going to know what we said last time versus this time. This happens every once in a while. I think we've probably had about 5 to 10 of these over the course of like 250 plus episodes.
By the way, I'm a little surprised that like Zoom doesn't keep a copy for you when you record something.
It
Is that
does.
like an extra service that you have to pay for or something like that?
I have, because of the way I edit, I tend to just record it to the hard drive.
Uh,
And it's always usually only had a problem in the past when I was recording using Audacity, like one person to person in the same room. And that is not what happened this time. This time my hard drive ate itself. But hopefully the shiny new computer sitting in front of me will not eat itself. And then also the battery hopefully will last longer. My other battery was starting to go away. Um, which I'm sure is very exciting for everybody out there listening, hoping to hear about Warner Brothers 2023 blockbuster extravaganza, The Flash.
Was it a blockbuster though?
I mean, it was supposed to be.
That's like a label that I feel like that label has no meaning anymore. Sometimes I'm like, I'll be browsing, Hulu or something, and it'll be a category, blockbusters, and it'll have
Yeah.
stuff in there that was like clearly like Speed Racer or something that I remember was bombed. And I'm like, do we remember what blockbuster means? Does it just mean like a big budget movie that was expected to do well now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a really good point. The certainly it has changed, and I would definitely argue most of the people writing the copy, for their intern's wage at, Amazon or whatever, have no idea what these words actually meant or do mean. But there were high expectations for this one. It had been in development for, as far as I can tell, about 65 years. Yeah.
Since about when Batman v Superman came out, I think they were in tandem developing a Flash solo movie at the same time as a Justice League movie. They just knew that they weren't sure like which one was going to come first, but there's been so many versions of it. If you look up like the Wikipedia, you know, production tab, it's ridiculous the number of creative teams that went on and off of it as they just became impatient or for one reason or another couldn't start shooting or somebody didn't
Yeah,
like
I do
somebody's take.
remember a lot of directors came and went on this in particular. A lot of different, like, well, my creative vision didn't match with what the studio wanted to do, sort of
Yep.
scenarios. Um, and the crazy thing about that is Warner Brothers will also count all of that in the budget versus the movie that does come out, which is
That's
why
correct.
Superman Returns is considered a
Yeah,
bomb because it had to make up not just for its own production cost, the other 25 Superman movies that they tried to make between Superman 4 and that point. So I can imagine Warner Brothers. I did check in since last week to see what's going on with Aquaman 2, in part because I saw what I believe now to have been a joke post on Twitter about Warner Brothers has lost Aquaman 2 on the Warner Brothers servers. Um, I could not find evidence of this actually being an article. Supposedly it was a thing in Variety, but I cannot find it. I don't believe it to be true. But what I did find was, hey, you know how you're not seeing any advertising for Aquaman? That's not a mistake. Warner Brothers is just letting this slew of movies fart itself out until the new Man of Steel or Superman comes out in a few years. Like basically expect DC to be more or less hiatus until 2025.
I mean it's not unprecedented for a movie to be lost. Toy Story 2 was reportedly lost until some Pixar employee saved it from having a backup. So it's possible, I guess, but yeah, especially with everything being shot on digital now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you hope they're, much like myself, my hard drive crashing, you hope they're putting something in the cloud, some copy of the movie. But so yeah, I mean, Blue Beetle has also come out since then. Blue Beetle has had modest success box office. It feels like it didn't bomb quite as badly as everyone expected, but nonetheless, is now already no longer in, the top earner for the weekend, up against horror movies and everything else that came out that was going to be more popular. So yeah, this is kind of the beginning of the end for the DC U as a franchise, and might as well be the bookend for it. They might as well have not released anything else after this, for both narrative reasons and probably box office reasons.
Yeah, I would say probably I'd say the beginning of the end was Wonder Woman 84, right? Because I mean, it's not really fair to talk about box office for a movie that came out during the pandemic, but I mean, that was hammered by critics. It didn't have nearly as warm reaction by critics or fans, and it kind of just seems like everything since then has been not so great.
Yeah.
And
They're definitely
there's
in
just
an
no
interesting.
energy, there's no energy left in the fandom, and it seems like there's no energy left in the studio either. There's no interest left in continuing what they're doing. But to your point before about the Flash was expected to do well, I mentioned this in the last time we recorded this, that so I knew some people that went to CinemaCon, right? Which is where like last spring, I guess, where all the major studios go out to Las Vegas and they do promotion for the movies that are coming out that summer mostly. And they did an advanced screening for the people at CinemaCon of The Flash. As far as I know, it was the first like big screening of it, and it had such a positive reaction from people who were there, who are mostly theater owners and like executives in the movie theater industry, that the tracking on it was upped. Right, they increased their estimates of how well it would do, and yet as time got closer to the Flash being released, they kept doing more and more. Warner Brothers now kept doing more and more of these fan screenings, and I got like invite after invite in my email box, I guess because I'm on some mailing list of like nerds. And they were doing these free screenings for
I'm
people.
just imagining that in the listserv. Nerds. The
Absolutely.
nerds listserv.
Hashtag nerds with money. um but not actually with money. I was trying to say nerds who spend money, which is different from
Yes.
nerds with money. I want to make that clear
Say
distinction.
that's the Sideshow Collectibles mailing list.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, and then the Flash comes out, and there's all this. I remember in the weeks leading up to it, there was not just the standard marketing stuff, but you were seeing on social media all these people who it's like the WB marketing was reaching out and offering screenings to these people who were not critics. Like I remember Stephen King was one of them who was like, boy, I don't really care about superhero movies that much, but I saw The Flash and it was fantastic. And I kept seeing quotes from people like that. And I was like, wow, maybe this really is something special, you know? And that's the vibe that it kind of had before it landed. And then it landed and everybody was like, eh, eh.
You saw it in the theater. I did not. I didn't
Yeah.
see it until a few
I saw
days
it three
before.
times in the theater, by the way.
Was that because you have two children and you went by yourself, or what was
That's
the
correct.
story?
Yeah. I went to an advanced screening because
Uh-huh.
I'm a nerd. And and then I went with my kid twice because he's such a huge fan of The Flash that he had to see it opening weekend and then he wanted to see it again. So even though I wasn't a huge, I didn't hate it. I should add that I didn't think it was terrible. It wasn't like a huge chore to sit through, but it was definitely did not meet my expectations. And that's on me for having expectations. That's a lesson, unfortunately, I've had to learn as a fan of things. Right? Do not
Yeah.
have expectations because more times than not, you are gonna be disappointed. And it's much better to just not have expectations and be blown away, right? Like I was for when I saw Into the Spider-Verse, I was like, this is going to be a terrible, cheap knockoff of Spider-Man, but I'll go see it because it's animation. It looks kind of fun. And I was just completely like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I'd much rather have that experience than the weeks and weeks of build up to something you think is going to be brilliant and then it hits and you're like and then the trying to convince yourself that no, I was just in a bad mood or something. It's fine. It's really fine.
You just described my experience with Phantom Menace.
So many things. Man of Steel for
Yeah,
me. I mean, so many things. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely know what you mean. I mean, it's I dread the that was really good and I wasn't expecting it to be thing because then you try and tell people about it and you feel like a crazy person going, no, really, this movie about the talking pig is
Yeah.
amazing, which was my first real experience with that of like, you've got to go see the talking pig movie. And everyone was like, it's a Charlotte's Web knockoff. I'm like, no, it's nothing like Charlotte's Web. It's a completely different thing. You've got to go see it. And then it starts getting nominated for Oscars, and people actually finally did go see Babe. But I felt like a crazy person in the wilderness. And then I dread if I am anticipating something. I was had a that cold hit in my stomach when I went to go see Black Panther because I was like, I want this to be good so bad. And if it's not, and it was,
It was, yeah.
but I was also like, if it's not, the consequences of this not being good are so high stakes that it's you just can't anyway. But with this movie at this point with Warner Brothers and DC, I'm just like, I'm going to do it for the podcast, so I guess I'll see it. Like that is really the level I'm at with their current slate of stuff. I'm like, I know Blue Beetle I'll probably watch in 3 months on Max, and Stuart and I will watch it and talk about it. But and I'm a Blue
Blue
Beetle
Beetle
comic
movie.
or was a Blue Beetle comics fan. The past
Yeah.
10 years of Blue Beetle comics have all been garbage. But the the movie itself, watched the trailers. I was like, oh, they got Keaton. Now I feel like I'm being baited into seeing the movie.
Yeah, yeah, that's like a double-edged sword because yeah, I totally felt like, you're manipulating me now,
Yeah,
It's like, oh, you found that spot. You found that like Pavlovian spot where it's like, I'm going to see Michael Keaton as Batman. And of course, I'm going to have an emotional response. Somebody of my age is going to like have loved that movie. And I did. And of course, I'm going to want to see Keaton back as Batman. And I did. But at the same time, I'm like so aware of the cynical decision making that goes into that it's like I was resisting, you know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was 14, I guess, when Batman '89 came out, and I was fully in. Was the Batman t-shirt guy and all that, through middle school leading up to that. And, and people were asking me, pointedly when we returned to school in the fall, how was Batman? And I was like, I think we all know it was pretty good. Um, but yeah, I in the week since I've seen the movie, I think I've turned on it even more, which may make it more too bad.
Oh no, because you weren't too positive last week either.
Yeah, and maybe it
I
won't be
was
too
like, I
much
was like
different.
defending it. I was like defending it
Yeah,
last week. But even as I was defending it, I was like, yeah, it's really not.
yeah. So my first beef with the movie, and so tonight I'm recording another podcast. I'm doing New Frontier, the animated movie you can watch on Max right now, Justice League New Frontier, based on the Darwin Cook graphic novel. That has kind of a real Silver Age. It is a Silver Age take on the DC universe, and I highly recommend it. It can maybe show you to what to me is kind of a um, ideal example of many of the DC characters of what I kind of consider to be the core of the DCU. It's very pre Harley Quinn exploding and all that, but it'll give you a rough idea. But there's to me, the Flash is a particular thing that kind of occurred, especially Barry Allen in the Silver Age, and he's carried through the Bronze Age, and that's when he kind of got a little dark, and then he got killed. He got killed the minute I showed up in comics because I showed up in comics right as Crisis was happening. So I never read Barry Allen comics. Barry Allen was dead until I was like 38 or something like that. So Wally West was my Flash. I think basically they're doing a riff on Wally West through this whole thing, which I think would have been a more interesting movie had they done that. But also, this is a time travel movie, not a Flash movie. And the Flash is not a character who spends his time traveling through time. That's just not his gig. He's a guy who runs real fast and does lots of things with his super speed that you see in this film, like walking through walls and whatnot. All those things are from the comic. The throwing lightning around is maybe less so. The whole like I discharge energy everywhere is more of a visual flourish in the comics than it is something that somebody can pick up a lightning bolt and throw it, sort of thing. Which feels like more it came from the TV show when they decided they wanted to do cool stuff with the Flash being able to do things other than punch people. And I think that's it. And then he has this whole group of villains that are super interesting, and none of that is in the movie. It's a he's playing Django to the Justice League, and he's not really being Flash in a lot of ways. I mean, you get the first 15 minutes of the movie that's kind of trying to set up where he's at currently. Like everything else that they've done with these DC movies, they jump to the thing that usually in the comics you've spent years of other stuff so leading up to it. So by the time this event occurs, it's actually meaningful. And they picked up at Flashpoint, which is one of the biggest crossover events or whatever, things that changed the DCU fundamentally.
Yeah, but it's like the fifth.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not an early crossover event. It's like after there's already been many other crossover events.
And we've had years of even Barry Allen being back by the time Flashpoint occurred. So it's a supremely weird way to deal with the Flash himself. I get that like your son may be super excited to see the Flash on screen because it's his guy, and he's getting for dad paid the ticket price. He gets to see the Flash on screen. I would have liked a movie that had Captain Cold robbing banks, or being up to no good, or Gorilla Grodd running around. To me, this is the third or fourth movie in the series. This is not the way you launch the Flash. There's no stakes here to me in this film.
They could have, yeah, and that was a weird choice too, because they could have given us like half a Flash movie. They could have still done the time travel thing, and still, instead of starting the movie with the weird slow motion CGI babies exploding out of the hospital, they could have given us like a classic Flash story, right?
Yeah.
Just one, just like where he stops bank robbery and it's Captain Cold, like you said, just something like just super classic Flash, and then move into the time travel thing. And it's kind of weird that they didn't do that. And I assume they didn't do it because they wanted to get as much Batman in there as possible, and the Wonder Woman cameo and stuff. But I don't know. I agree that it's a time travel movie more than it's a Flash movie. But at the same time, I did kind of like the time travel story. All right. I mean, I didn't love it, but I thought like when it was being, his older self running into his younger self and trying to talk himself into doing stuff, and being upset with his younger self because he doesn't understand all the great things that he has, and all that stuff, all the drama between the different versions of Barry, I thought was pretty good and was pretty solid. And where it kind of lost me was in all the world ending stakes that and killing Batman and killing Supergirl 50 times over, and the fact that I thought the biggest thing, as I told you last time, I thought was weird, is it kind of the fact that they chose to put the climax of the movie in another movie, which is Man of Steel. And it's Man of Steel. It's like a movie from 10 years ago that, I mean, some people are diehard fans of it, I guess, but it's not like a movie that I get the feeling that a lot of people are that familiar with and that anxious to go revisit. And it kind of like all their references kind of depend on you being familiar with what happened in Man of Steel, and kind of depend on you being familiar with General Zod and his plan to take over the world and stuff. And it's all the stuff I get because I'm a super DC guy or whatever. But I'm just like, gosh, this is such a random choice to make,
Yeah. There are a lot of things they could have done. They could have made a reverse Flash movie if they really wanted to do the travel through time thing. I think the impact of the loss that he felt and what Barry has, the younger Barry, that version has, would have had more impact if you'd had a couple of movies of Dad sitting in jail, Barry's trying to help him out. You see more of what Barry's life is actually like, other than the 10 minutes we get of it, 15 minutes of it we get of it before he is, heading back to the future. Like, I think maybe introducing the idea he runs so fast to stop someone in the first or second movie that he travels through time. Then he talks to Bruce. That's the start of this movie of hey, I did a thing, in the last movie. I want to explore the implications of this. I just think there's a better way to do it. And it was just felt like they really didn't understand how serial storytelling worked, or, how you get people to care about these movies, which is bananas given how the Marvel universe unfolded. They've been in a rush to get to, I guess because they looked at it and said the first Iron Man made whatever it was, $300 million, but the Avengers made $1 billion, and we want to make $1 billion every time. So everything's got to be Avengers level.
It doesn't work like that.
It does not work like that.
It does not work like that.
And the expectation, I mean, it was a shock when like Captain Marvel made $1 billion, right? I mean, no one saw that coming. That, I think, my guess is they probably thought it was going to be at that point probably $500 million, which is still an enormous amount of money. But it was the right movie in the right place at the right time. Everyone was all in on the Marvel U, but you just can't, for every one of these things, just do you. And the comics themselves have had this problem of every year we're going to have a massive crossover event, and everyone burns out, and you lose people from the comics following the comics because it's how when I was reading Marvel quite a bit in around 2007, and they went straight from Civil War right into Secret Invasion. I quit reading Marvel. I was like, this is too much. Like, I had no idea what Secret Invasion really was, other than something with scrolls. Because I was like, I'm not spending all this money again this year, and nor buying. I don't know what matters. I don't know.
I've lost track of the number of times I quit comics over things like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I really am down to just reading Superman and Wonder Woman at this point. Like, I'll pick up Captain America and a few other things, but it's the slow death by a million cuts every superhero comics reader gets eventually. And you eventually just fade away, but they're doing it to their audience now, and they have no understanding of why it's happening.
So, we should mention too, so that this movie had high expectations going into it of being a blockbuster, like you said, and of having a high, critical acclaim. And it didn't really achieve either of those things. However, it did make almost $300 million domestic. So it's not like nobody saw it, right? A good number of people. It made a decent amount of money, except that the budget was so high is the problem, and the expectations were so high. So it's one of those like high performing failures, if you will. A lot of people saw The Flash, and as you've attested, in the time since it's come out on HBO and more accessible, a lot of people reached out to you who aren't necessarily, comic book movie fans and said, hey, this is pretty good. So, it's not terrible. It has an appeal to people, and especially appeal to people who maybe aren't, as invested in this kind of stuff as we are. But it had a lot of stuff kind of going against it. And one of the things going against it, in my opinion, is the multiverse thing, which when had this movie been released in time, it would have come out before a lot of these other movies recently, like, Spider-Man No Way Home and Across the Spider-Verse and Everything Everywhere All at Once
Multiverse of
and
Madness.
Multiverse of Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. Like the Flash, the Flash should have been first to the multiverse thing, because in the comics the Flash was first, and in the movie universe now it kind of looks like it's an also ran, like it's a copycat of all of a current trend, which is a shame, right? So that kind of makes it seem like, oh, it's just doing the thing that all these movies are doing, and so that, I'm sure, kind of tamped down the excitement. The other thing it had going against it was the shenanigans of the star of the movie getting in all kinds of legal trouble, and headlines for very strange, one might say, cult-like behavior in the years, in the year, especially the year running up to release, to where all the chatter online about the Flash for the longest time was, is Warner Brothers going to release it, or is it too much of a PR disaster and they'll just shelve it?
I certainly think that hurt it at the box office. The kids seemed, we grew up in an era where our rock stars were routinely punching people and being awful people. That was considered a feature, not a bug. And a lot of the stuff Ezra Miller did, I would never say was behavior. It seems pretty egregious, but I'm also kind of like, well, he's not going to be doing that on screen. Like, I get it, but I'm also can watch it. It doesn't cost me more or less to watch it on Max. I don't know if he gets 5 cents more into his pocket because I watched it or not.
I would say so. The SAG strikes would say he doesn't get anything.
Yeah. So I am sure that for people younger than us, that was probably a deterrent from actually seeing the film. But at the same time, had none of that happened, I was never super in on his Flash as he was presented in the first film, in the Justice League film. So
the other thing I think it kind of has going against it is the Flash TV show is so recent and kind of popular, like not like super popular, but it's been around a while. People know about it. People like it. And this is not that, and I don't want to say it's confusing. I don't think people are like, what is going on here? Why is a different person the Flash? But it is a little weird to have such a popular TV character show up in a completely different version of the character, concurrently on the movie screens.
Yeah, to me,
that's basically what turned my son into a fan of the Flash, is the TV show, not the comics or the movies.
I think it would be hilarious if Gunn made Grant Gustin the Flash in his universe. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, he's really good, actually.
Start paying him millions of dollars to show up in those movies.
I think if I were Grant Gustin, though, I would want to do anything but play the Flash for the rest of my life. After the whatever it was, 7 years or whatever,
Yeah, I'm sure he's ready to
enough.
hang up the tights. Yeah. I don't even want to say to get a better costume. They finally fixed his costume in like the last 3 seasons, but
like from what I could tell, they were selling this movie just before it was coming out as a Batman movie, first and foremost. I mean, Michael Keaton was front and center in all the promotions. He was doing all the interviews. He was doing all the talk shows. He was showing up in my Instagram feed going, you know what fathers really want for Father's Day is to go see me in the Flash because I'm Batman. Right?
I remember that now.
He had the entire marketing campaign rested on Michael Keaton's shoulders. And, I think some people went to see it for that, but I don't think going to see the Flash movie with the promise of a cameo of your favorite Batman is necessarily enough to get, enough people to go.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the performance of Ezra Miller as being the kind of highlight of the film, or a highlight of the film, and I would not disagree with that. Like, look, the guy, whatever other issues he has, he's really good in this. I've never seen him in anything but these things, the DC movies.
You didn't see the Fantastic Beasts movies?
No, dude.
No. No, dude. I mean, to be fair, I work for a movie theater company, I get in for free. So I see a lot of stuff that I normally wouldn't pay to see.
Well, I was so happy to tap out at the end of the last like real Harry Potter movie that I was just like, oh no, they're making more of them. I just that was a journey I was happy to do once. I did it same as I'm like they made more Lord of the Rings. Like I don't know, just let me enjoy my 3 movie cycle here. Um, but yeah, but he I think that's the highlight. It's really his performance. And then I think I start thinking like, well, what is this movie actually about? And the big takeaway he takes at the end is to quit trying and let Batman and Supergirl die. That's the right thing to do. And that's a really, when I said I sat with the movie and kind of turned on it more, I've tried to like, we kind of said it like ho 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 as like a joke last time. And this time I'm like, I don't really know what else this movie's about other than like they don't do a good job of necessarily of him dealing with his grief in any particular way. I mean, he hugs his mom because he sees her again in the past, but like we joked about last time, he's also being like a weird creeper who would probably be the first and foremost person who would turn up on the suspects list, like after she got killed, like 4 hours later.
Well, which is fine because he doesn't exist in that timeline anymore. If they go looking for him, he's gone.
Yeah.
But no, I mean I know what you're saying. I did think that the scene with the mom where he gets to say goodbye to his mom was a touching scene. But it's a scene that when you think about it later, you're like, I don't know if it really holds together. But in the
Yeah.
moment seeing it, it was affecting. Um and having seen it now a few times at home because my son's put the movie on several times at home. I do like that scene. Um but yeah, the message of the movie does seem to be, and they set up pretty early in the movie, not all problems have a solution, right? And they frame it as like you just have to know when to quit, which is not, as I said last time we talked about this, not necessarily a message that I disagree with. There have been many times in my life when I probably should have quit earlier. But I feel like there's maybe a better way to frame that than saying you need to know when to quit, which is like what you're doing isn't solving the problem. You need to come at the problem from a different angle, right? Or something like that. Like it's not that you're quitting. It's not that you're just like deciding I'm going to give up. It's that you're deciding that, okay, this is not working. What will work? Let's fight, the problem from another point of view or something like that. Where will my efforts actually make a difference? And try something else. That's like a more positive spin on it that I don't think that the movie actually tries to do. And the other thing is we don't really see at the end of the movie, I mean, spoiler alert, what the result is. I mean, the mom is still dead, but the dad is now no longer in jail, but he's in a different universe. He's clearly, so we don't know what other consequences there are left over from what the thing that because he still does make changes to the timeline. So we don't know really. It's kind of implied that like, haha, there's still changes to the timeline, and it's played as a joke, but really it could be big changes to the time. Like it still could be just as bad.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like Marvel. That DC was saying, look, everyone's contracts are done. This will be our way to, swap in a new Cyborg or a new, Aquaman or whatever. And when you could start seeing the mechanics, and this is a classic thing for DC Comics and their events, is what editorial mistake from 20 years ago are they fixing this week? And you can just see it all. The mechanics of what are happening on the page are so evident all the time. They're a little bit better about it now because they've decided to quit touching everything all the time. I think, but it's a really weird message to end with. Superheroes basically are there as, your fantasy fixtures of the people who can affect change that other people can't.
And they don't give up. And they're supposed to inspire you by their
Yeah.
perseverance.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, in Spider-Man, classically, there's a reason everybody loves Spider-Man. It's because just when you think he's down and out, he finds that way to make it all work out. He pays the price, but he picks up that huge thing that fell on him. He does whatever the thing is. It's in like the first Spider-Man movie when Keaton drops, a whole warehouse on him. Peter stands up and picks up all that stuff that's sitting on him, and he goes on to go, continue to fight. And that is really kind of the idea of the superhero. The powers and all that are all a nicety. They're the things that differentiate them from the other person in the suit. And anyway, but I just find it a profoundly weird and almost cynical message, but that's kind of been DC since these movies have started. I mean, there's nothing not cynical about Man of Steel.
And I want to say, while we're on the subject of Spider-Man, that another reason, a big reason that The Flash didn't land with me as well as it might have, was I saw it just a couple weeks after Across the Spider-Verse, which I went over last week as we were talking about this. Sorry to repeat myself again, but I mean, Across the Spider-Verse deals with many of the similar themes of this movie, and just does it with so much more grace and craft and beauty in the way that the images are rendered. And it's a movie that is smarter than I am. I love when movies are smarter than I hate when I'm watching a movie and I'm just like, oh, now this is going to happen, and I'm just waiting for the thing to happen. I love when a movie makes a choice that I didn't see coming, and it really surprises me. Across the Spider-Verse did that a couple times. And so I saw it just after that, and I was like, my goodness. I mean, it's like seeing, I don't know, a great painting and then seeing like a crayon drawing of the same thing. It's like, it was just, the comparison was so stark that really didn't help. And yeah, and the visuals, I mean, movies are a visual medium, right? And there's been a lot of chatter online about the bad special effects and bad CGI, and the directors come back and said, oh, they're not bad, that was a choice. It was a choice to make the stuff in the Speed Force look as artificial and distant as possible, or whatever, because it's a representation of reality. It's not and all this stuff, and it's like, but it just looked bad. It was too good at creating a distance. Because
it looks like an unfinished CGI or screen from 2004 era video games. You can't do that. You dropped everybody into the uncanny valley with recognizable faces.
And there's ways to make things look artificial and still look good. I mean, and Across the Spider-Verse and the new Ninja Turtles movie, shows that you can make things look, not real, but yet beautiful to look at. And The Flash chose not to do that. And that's hard to ignore.
I mean, comparing the artistry of what happens in those Spider-Verse movies and the ugliness of this movie, the only time this movie really looks pretty is when they're in the Batcave. And maybe arguably some of the scenes with blue-caped Batman on his motorcycle on the bridge at the beginning.
It was nice to see finally a blue and gray Batman.
Oh man, I was over the moon.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah. So you can do this on screen, everybody.
You see, it is possible. Yeah. Although I thought those scenes were way too brightly lit.
I mean, it's Batman in the middle of the day. Yeah. It's always going to look weird. unless it's Adam West. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that they tried to give a nod to the people who have followed DC stuff their entire lives by, at the end of the multiverse collapsing and showing us everyone from Adam West to George Reeves as Superman to, the imaginary Nick Cage Superman and Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater. But it's like, if I know those things at that level or deeper, this movie fundamentally doesn't feel like what I expect. I mean, honestly, the '90s Flash show is about is even less close, but at least they, in some ways, but they stuck to at least he's fighting a villain every week, and we're kind of building over time what his mythos is. And we head immediately to Cataclysm and saving the world, but it's also super personal because it's a movie. You got to make it about people's personal stuff every single time. And I just kind of miss the superheroes fighting people who aren't necessarily. I mean, maybe it's the apotheosis of all of this. He's not just fighting at the end of the day. Zod, who would be the villain who has nothing to do with that. Zod's not really the villain of the movie. He's the villain of the movie. He shows up at the end fighting himself. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what these movies are all kind of about at the end. If it's Kal-El fighting Zod because of stuff that his dad did, and the whole planet has to pay the consequences of it. That's an aspect of Superman that I'm tired of seeing it because that's not really what Superman's deal is not dealing with his dad's garbage. And in this, it's like the Flash maybe for decades was one of the most pure superheroes as far as like he has villains, he has the things he is doing are just altruistic. He is upholding the good. And this just turns it into, sorry, I've gone so far up my own butt, I broke reality. Which that maybe that's my personal take on this stuff. And I'm like, after 50 superhero movies in the past 15 years, I just want to see a superhero actually fight a villain, and it has nothing to do with them.
I mean, yeah, I don't think you're ever really going to see that though. Because it's too perfect to do this villain is a dark reflection of me kind of thing.
I don't have a problem of it being a dark reflection of me. What I'm tired of is I'm cleaning up my own mess.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true. And I've said that for a long time. That was actually I've quit comics a couple of times. I quit comics was just because I realized that everything is it's like a snake eating its tail. It's only about itself. It's only about fixing whatever continuity thing happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. And it's not actually about anything else,
I mean, if there was a recent run in Action Comics where like it has nothing to do with Superman. Warworld shows up in orbit around Earth, causes some problems, and Superman's like, I've had it. Liberate Warworld. And he, in fact, goes and does that. It takes a year and a half or something of comics time or reader time as the issues come out month over month. But it was nice to see stuff that wasn't about like Superman worrying about, I mean, what has editorial done to Jack with reality this time or any of that? It was just a straight Superman story where he was helping. They weren't Earthlings, but he was helping people. And they've kind of maintained that now across both titles for Superman, and it's kind of refreshing in its weird way of like, yeah, of course they're dealing with like Lex is doing whatever Lex is doing, but that's not the problem. Lex is not the problem. Anyway, I just realizing kind of like in retrospect, like this movie is the culmination of these movies are so about whatever the hero's journey is. And if he's really fighting with himself, I'm sure they think, oh, we've done deep poetry. I'm like, dude, we've been doing this since Batman '89, and they made the Joker the guy who killed his parents. Like it's well-worn territory. They've been doing it since Zod showed up in Superman 2. Like you're not doing anything new. You want to do something new? Bring in Thanos, who doesn't know who any of these dumbass Avengers are, and all he wants to do is kill half of everybody. He has this man with a simple plan. Um,
What I what I kind of miss is like when I watch these things now, I kind of like, if you take away the suit and you take away the powers, is there anything about this character that is inspiring? Is there anything about this character that like, shows that they deserve the suit? There's this line in one of the Spider-Man movies, I think it was Homecoming, where he says to Iron Man, I'm nothing without the suit, right?
yeah,
And he says back, if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve it, which is true. And he then goes on, to prove that he does deserve it. And that's something that I don't see very much in these movies now, is something like, the moment in, as cheesy as it was, like in Rocky 4, where he turns the crowd, right, with his perseverance, right? They're cheering, they're chanting against him, and then they see how much he's taking this punishment, and they start chanting for him. And at the end, he talks to the crowd, and that kind of thing, where it's like, there's something about this character that is appealing beyond the fact that they can beat up the bad guy, or beyond the fact that they can fly, or they can run fast, or they have a shiny costume. And I'm not really seeing that in the Flash.
and I really don't see it in like Aquaman. Like people loved Aquaman, but I was like, I have no idea what I'm watching here. This is the goofiest movie, and I don't mean to, like, I'm going to make people mad who liked Aquaman, but
Let's just burn it all down.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the movie, he's standing there making out with Amber Heard as people are being murdered everywhere around him. And I was like, we're doing it again. This is Man of Steel all over again. And nobody cares, because this time they're doing it with bright colors. They're murdering people in Technicolor, and now it's okay. Like it did not make any sense to me. And I just want Warner Brothers to get their shit together. And when people are, oh, James Gunn is all the dumb Snyder Bros, I'm like, one, go touch grass, dude. Like, and go see a different kind of movie for once. But I just want those characters. If you're gonna make a superhero movie, think about what is you're actually showing. It's a visual medium. Think about what everything on frame is communicating back to the audience, because right now they're communicating a bunch of hand wavy dumb bullshit in most of their movies. And I think this one's trying to do better. I think the characters are, they're trying to have Batman, come back, but it's also like we've already seen that in the Dark Knight trilogy. It's nowhere near what was in the comics as far as Dark Knight Returns, him coming back. And it's like, also, why does Bruce Wayne always become like a weird hobo if you leave him alone?
Yeah, yeah. He lets his hair grow out, but yet the mansion is still impeccably clean.
Yes.
So like he has no personal hygiene, but yet he's going around, because I didn't see Alfred anywhere, right? So he's either going around dusting everything, or he's paying for some service to come in. But why doesn't, if he cares about how the mansion looks, why doesn't he care about how he personally looks? My biggest thing about that, I thought Michael Keaton was pretty good in the movie, but I kind of feel like, well, it's a shame it was wasted on this. I'd much rather have seen them do a proper Michael Keaton Returns movie.
Yes.
Have it be, The Dark Knight Returns or something similar to that, and bring back, Michelle Pfeiffer and everybody too. That would have been fantastic, or could have been. I mean, who knows?
Now you're making me sad.
Messed up too, but
I would have liked that a lot.
Yeah. And now I think, unfortunately, because of the way Hollywood works, this was our shot for Michael Keaton. And they're like, oh, didn't do well. So I guess that was it for Michael Keaton Batman. That was his last hurrah.
We killed him 80 times, so
yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that, kids. You got your Batman back. We're gonna murder him repeatedly.
Yeah, but I mean, It's like, well, we gave you what you want, but you didn't come to see it. But did you really? Did you really give us what we
Yeah.
want? Not, you know.
I think the toy people understood what people wanted more than the movie people. They made amazing toys
That's
for this
true. Yeah.
thing. Like you could get a full 2-scale Batwing for this dumb thing. I don't know if it had the rotating cockpit and all that cool stuff, but I mean, the thing was like 3 feet wide with, a 6 foot 6 inch action figure in it. That's amazing.
It's
I mean,
just too bad
I'm
we
not
didn't
going to
get
drop
a
$500 on it, but
we didn't get a new Bob the Goon figure, unfortunately.
I would be curious to go to Target right now to see who is the Bob the Goon left over from this movie. Uh, and they introduce a new Supergirl, and she gets murdered 80 times. And it's like, oh, I thought you guys were like legit trying to introduce Supergirl into these movies.
Nah, she has no real character other than just being angry.
Yeah,
She's like a rage machine. She spends the entire movie just screaming and murdering people,
yeah.
which is
Which,
fun to watch. I can't say it's not fun to watch, but it's not
yeah.
real, memorable in terms of Supergirl.
And it's very strange. She had 6 years of the TV show where they kind of did something much closer to kind of like maybe late 60s into the 70s era Supergirl for the TV show. And the comics have really struggled with it because people keep deciding she's got to be a rage machine in the comics. And that's clearly what they picked up on. Um, and they did borrow from the Flashpoint Superman for her. In Flashpoint, Superman is kept in a big dark cave and they release him. And when he's released, he kind of goes nuts because humanity has not been cool to him. What this movie does is try and turn it around to, oh, but not all people are bad. So I'll be on your team, Flash. And I'm not sure. I guess it kind of
It's
earns
not
it.
really earned though.
Yeah.
Like
It more happens than it's earned.
it just happens. Yeah. It's just like, I'm good now. Click.
Oh, that was the problem with your Supergirl doll. She was set to evil. Oh,
Is that a Simpsons reference?
yeah. That's it. Your Krusty the Clown
That's
doll.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but yeah, it's got issues as all of these movies do. And I wish I weren't just sitting here bagging on it because I know I have friends who liked it. I know children like it. I know I'm just being an old crank who
My
probably
kid
should
doesn't
have
listen to
outgrown the
podcasts,
Flash a long
so
time
I'm
ago.
fine.
But what's that?
My kid doesn't listen to podcasts, so
Oh
he
yeah.
would be mad at me. He as soon as he saw that this movie had a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes, he was like, "What is wrong with people? This movie has everything." He like went on this rant. He's like, it's got action, it's got sci-fi, it's got romance, kind of barely.
Yeah.
He's like, it makes you cry. It's got everything.
At least waves at everything.
That's,
Kind
I
of,
mean, he's not wrong, and it does. I would say it does. It tries to be everything, which is I don't know that it succeeds, but it does. It tries to be a lot of things.
it yes, it tries to be funny. The comedy is hard, and you can see there like the whole opening sequence is supposed to be a big comedic thing.
I didn't like.
And
I didn't laugh at that, but I did laugh at some of the Barry stuff, the young
yeah,
Barry stuff.
when
I
he's
thought some of the
dealing with
jokes did
himself,
land
yeah.
well. Yeah, and it was all the stuff with young Barry for me. Although I can understand other people, finding him annoying, but
I never found him annoying. Again, I think that was probably the strongest part was Ezra Miller with a camera rolling while he was doing his shtick was good stuff. I think the Speed Force, not the multiverse point, but when he would run, they managed to make it look different when he took off. Um, it at least was different from what we'd seen from other speedsters and Marvel movies. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that was enough anymore. And because I've been also seeing that on the TV show for 7 years or whatever. So seeing the Flash run fast, and it not looking like it did in the 1990s, where they clearly just had, or actor running on a treadmill in front of a green screen. You're of course it's gonna look better.
Well, maybe in the new DC universe, which launches after Aquaman 2, um, we'll finally get Wally West Flash, because Wally West Flash was also my Flash. So, I was familiar with Barry Allen because, they kept making references to him and I knew a little bit about Silver Age comics, but for me, the Flash was Wally West. And for me, the Flash comics were the Mark Waid comics and the Grant Morrison comics. So it would be much preferred to me personally if they went with Wally West, because he has a much more, I don't know. For me, he's got a better, not better. He's got a clearer personality.
All I care about at this point is that I don't see on the slate, as they always put up their like 5-year plan. And if we've learned anything from the Soviets, it's that 5-year plans don't work out. But I don't want to see Crisis on Infinite Earths on that freaking 5-year plan. I never want to see it. Like, surprise me with it if it's going to happen. But if the Anti-Monitor starts showing up at the end of every movie, like cackling, I'm out. I'm not even kidding.
I would prefer at some point before the Discovery merger and everything. I remember them saying, DC is just going to have very loosely connected movies, and we're going to be, instead of continuity driven like the MCU is, we're going to be creator driven. We're going to allow individual filmmakers to set the tones for their individual characters and whatnot. And I actually, had they actually stuck to that, I kind of would prefer that. I kind of prefer, I loved the first few phases of the MCU, but I think that that's over now. And I think they need to stop trying to replicate it. And I would prefer that they just go back to making good self-contained movies that don't have to build an entire universe and don't have to sell toys, for 15 years in the future or whatever, that just tell a good story and establish characters. And maybe if it's good enough, can have a sequel. And maybe if that one's good enough, can have another sequel. I would prefer that.
I'm of a mixed mind on it. I mean, I definitely see it. My problem with it is Warner Brothers' answer to that was like, let's take a children's character like the Joker and make a, Martin Scorsese movie.
That's true.
And so
yeah,
it's fine. That movie made a lot of money.
It depends on it depends on how they do it, I guess. That's true.
And I guess I would just like to, I don't see any reason they can't do both.
They're stuck on The Dark Knight, I think, is the problem. So for the longest time, The Dark Knight was their biggest success financially, and one of their biggest successes, as far as critically, and it's universally beloved. And I think ever since then, they're just like, we just have to repeat this formula for everything, and it just doesn't apply to everything. Is the problem,
Yeah, I mean, it was what they applied clearly directly to Man of Steel. And yeah, and we're trying to run the opposite direction from the Reeves movies, which was not what anyone was particularly asking for, except for 13-year-olds with their PlayStations. So I get it. I mean, they sold the shit out of it to those kids, and those kids are now have turned it into a cult. So, well done, I guess. But I don't know.
You can't sell your stuff to a cult. That's not enough. You can't just have like a dedicated fan base. You have to sell your stuff to everyone. Barbie didn't succeed because like people, diehard Barbie fans went. They succeeded because everybody went.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it was the interesting experiment of them doing the whole Snyder Cut thing, which was the worst thing. I mean, the crowd was finally starting to die down, and then they did that. But it didn't add. I don't think it added any new subscribers. And they're like, oh, right. It's not just how many clicks you get. That doesn't matter. It's how many subscribers you have, because that's where the money comes from. So
Yeah. But I mean, on the other hand, the production was shut down. They were hard up for stuff to release. So I understand why they did it.
yeah,
It
it's
was still
because
a bad
Warner Brothers
decision.
has no back catalog. They could have
Yeah.
constantly pulled from to show people things again. Uh, just kills me. Uh,
Anyway, The
even when you go,
Flash. The Flash is a movie that happened and many people liked it, and I'm happy that they liked it.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but if you liked it, you have bad taste and don't know what you're doing.
Which, by the way, that's why when you said before about when you really like something, you're afraid to recommend it because you sound like a crazy person.
Yeah.
And I've just kind of, because like in my video store days, I used to recommend stuff every day, all the time, constantly recommending stuff. And now I've come to a place where I don't want to recommend anything to anyone because I just feel like personal taste is so, subjective or whatever. And really at the end of the day, what does it matter what I thought of something? I'm not even that interested in what I thought of it. It is what it is. And I have my own personal feelings about it. And that's how I will base my, purchasing decisions or whatever. But who else needs to know that? I don't really, because if I like something, I'm probably not going to convince you of liking it just because I like it. And even if I could, is that a good way to spend my time? I don't really think so. So I mostly just share my excitement for things, but I don't recommend things.
I mean, I'm very much in the same boat. It's made the podcast a very weird thing to do because all I can do is talk about what was my impression, and I've been blogging that way now for a decade of like, look, I talk about movies, but I'm talking about it strictly from my perspective,
Yeah.
and I can't. We often with Simon at the end, we'll kind of at the end go, here's where you might want to watch this movie. This is the right vibe for, watching this movie or whatever. And I think I agree with that. Like, it's watch it with some buddies while you're having a cocktail or whatever. And I would even pitch this movie to be that movie. It's a thing that is hand wavy about trying to do something important or deep, but at the end of the day, it's a popcorn movie that has about the same central hold of story as like a Barbarian movie that was a knockoff of Conan. Like it's a bunch of nonsense with Batman and Supergirl and the Flash running through time. It's very silly.
I would say watch it with a 9-year-old because
I
I've watched it with a 9-year-old
yeah.
a few times, and his enthusiasm has actually enhanced the experience for me.
So I'll be totally honest and say I have mixed feelings about it. It's always very hard for me when I'm watching a movie, and I accept it now. But my kid liked it, therefore it's good.
No, I'm not saying
But
it's good. I'm not
no, I
saying
know.
it's
And I appreciate that you're
good.
making
Yeah.
the difference because a lot of my friends do not.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, they loved the Mario movie. It's amazing. I'm like, I
It's all right.
I'm really glad you all enjoyed your time watching the Mario movie. That's my takeaway. I did see the Mario movie. I have opinions about it. It was delightful, but
I
it
just
it
watched it this morning, by the way,
yeah, it's
again
cute.
with a
My favorite
9-year-old.
part's the Rainbow Bridge part. That's the
The
good part.
Rainbow Bridge part is fantastic. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we all have to be very careful, but also understand, not everything's for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's fine.
And
Yeah.
that includes superhero things, even if you're a person who owns way too much superhero shit, as some
Especially.
of us might be. Um,
But no,
and that's
I'll say on social media that, hey, I'm going to see this thing. I'm excited about going to see this thing. Right. And sometimes I'm excited just to do a thing with my kid or my family
right.
or whatever. And people will ask me, how was it? And I'm always like, I don't really want to say because if I liked it and you don't like it, then you're not going to trust me.
Yeah.
If I didn't like it, it might still be something you would like, and I don't want to dissuade you from seeing it. So it really doesn't matter to me, whatever,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter
Well,
whether I liked it.
I've the past year been dipping my toe back into Star Trek fandom, and there is a deep, dark black hole of let's just not talk about this.
Okay, fair enough.
That is not with you, but like that is a community that I'm like, y'all are absolutely at civil war, and there's 15 armies at least all
Oh
fighting
yeah,
here.
no, we've talked about this the different fandoms, right?
Yeah.
Star Trek is a harsh fandom. They're not as bad as Star Wars. Star Wars is the worst.
Star Wars is just I've just ceded over to you. If
Star
there's
Wars
people who like
and
Star Wars in the best Dave Filoni way, and then there's all the boneheads.
yeah,
And that's it. And there's like maybe 10% of the Dave Filoni type fans, and everybody else is crazy.
but the DCU fans are terrible, toxic. The Star Wars fans are terrible and toxic. Star Trek, not quite as bad, but still pretty bad. But yeah, your best, I found, most wholesome, most welcoming, less gatekeepy fan community is the horror fan community.
100%.
Those guys are fantastic. And a lot of times I follow a lot of that stuff, even though I don't care about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I really don't care about the Saw movies, and I really don't care about a lot of slasher movies. And they talk about this stuff all the time. And I don't, and that's fine. And I let them be joyful about it because I just want to be part of the excitement, you know. There is horror stuff that I do like, but
Yeah.
they talk about a lot of stuff I don't care about a lot. And I just put up with it because they're so nice about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the I need to justify the thing I like is better than the thing you like.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me a
Um,
better person because I like this thing.
yeah, and I that's just rife. I mean, the Star Trek fandom is its own weird bag of
It's like the original fandom in many ways.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of those people are still kicking around and trying to have a conversation as if it's a rational thing to talk about Star Trek 66 in comparison to Strange New Worlds. It's like it's just not. And I I love it to see like when they're trying to make it work, but at the same time, it's anyway. We're way off the Flash, but it is also a multiverse, this Star Trek thing
That's
now.
right.
And I'm
Star
just
Trek
like,
is now a
the more
multiverse.
you embrace that this is not that this, no one who worked on that thing is working on this thing, the happier you'll be. But
I think the issue you're trying to say is that some problems don't have a solution and that we really just need to give up
you need
and
to give
let
up.
Batman and Supergirl die again and again and let the spaghetti uncook itself.
Um, yeah, I don't know who's going to listen to this podcast. The numbers are in the garbage these days for the podcast. But if you did listen to it and you have opinions, I would frankly love to hear because I know I've been super negative, but I would love to hear y'all's feedback. Like, hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Blue Sky, hit me, Stuart's, I think, on both services. And, just find us, talk to us back in SoundCloud or YouTube. But I'll direct Stuart to any of those comments if you have anything to say about this movie. Um, I this is just how I watch movies is did the story hold? And for me, this one didn't. Um, there's a lot of other things, of course, you want to look for, but this one just was not doing it for me and was, I think, a good bookend. And I think it's hilarious that even in trying to wrap up the DCU, we now have a whole Aquaman movie we have to wait for. It'll be released, I guess, at Christmas or something. Um, but
Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Because they keep pushing everything into next year.
yeah, well, pay
Watch
the actors and
Aquaman's afraid of
writers,
Taylor
WB.
Swift. The headline will be Aquaman runs away from Taylor Swift or whatever.
I'll tell you what, man. If I was a movie making movies, I definitely would be looking for what can I do that features an attractive blonde woman because I think that's my only like takeaway as to what's going to sell in the movie.
Well, Aquaman
We
has
talked last time about
Yeah.
why Barbie worked. I'm not going to get into that today. But yeah, it's hilarious to me that Barbie and Taylor Swift are going to be the two things that absolutely just crushed the box office this year in Oppenheimer.
absolutely, yeah. My yearly bonus is going to come in a pink envelope from the movie theater.
That would be amazing. All right, everybody. Well, Stuart, thank you so much for doing this again.
Absolutely. We had to go
And
back and fix it.
we got to go
And do
back
it
and
right
fix
this time.
You know, the great irony will be really if my computer crashes and I lose this. I'm almost at this point hoping it happens just to prove a point. Like the universe is just poking me in the eye. Like, you should have liked the Flash. Oh, anyway, if any, again, comment back to us. Love to hear from you. I'm not. Just look for Signal Watch wherever you go. I'm not the weird YouTube channel that's some small town's city council that also calls itself Signal Watch. That's not me. But I am Signal Watch podcast, and I should pop up. So, all right, everybody, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.